thankful Thursday evening, fellow freedmen, reparationists, allies, and guests. My co host and I are grateful to have all of you joining us for another episode of the Religion and Reparations Power Hour, the rare Power Hour, the most powerful hour on the web. I'm co host and co producer Kelly Matthews coming to you live from Capitol Hill, D.C. And joining me this evening are co host and fellow freedmen Cynthia McDonald, Arthur Ward, and Derrick Williams. Cynthia and Arthur are active members of the Freedmen Descendants of Chicago. And on our panel, they provide space and inclusion for all of our agnostic and atheist brothers and sisters. And if you joined us during our last episode, you also know that they are both well versed and practice Buddhism. Because, as Arthur put it, from his perspective, Buddhism is an understanding, not a doctrine of faith. Besides sharing their wealth of knowledge and experience on many religions, one of their strengths on our panel is to bring a different approach and context to the various religious subject matters we address. Derrick and I are both members of the DMV Freedmen, but Derrick's historical religious understanding, awareness, and interest in Buddhism make him an essential part of our team. I'm Kelly Matthews, the panel's resident Baptist Christian, and between the four of us, or some combination thereof, and with the indispensable production and promotion work of Natalie Rosalye, Miss Everything and a Bag of Munchos, we come to you live at 7 p.m. every other Thursday. Yes, every other Thursday to discuss religion and reparations, two dynamic topics that we've intersected into a dedicated show. And to be clear, this is not a show to drag any religion. This is not a show to change anyone's religious beliefs. This is a show that acknowledges that we are all individuals, and in that individuality, there are different schools of thought and spiritual edification that feed our collective soul. This show celebrates the individual spirit and seeks to unify everyone with a heart and fortitude for justice. The American freedmen have toiled, suffered, and died as we built the world's superpower without receiving almost none of its wealth or security. And with this show, we're inviting all religions and people committed to doing what's right, fair, and just, and to unite and revive the focus and determination of Dr. King and the 1960s Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
This is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing your time within this space, a safe space for dialogue, enlightenment, engagement, and action. If you joined us during our last episode, you know the conversation was so engaging we ran over our hour mark and knew we had to circle back with our distinguished guest, Rosalye Settles. Friends and family call her Rose, and Rose put quite a bit on our minds to ponder about Nichiren Buddhism and how inner knowledge, reflection, and working on self shows up outwardly in the physical world as well as in the 10 worlds of Buddhism. And tonight, we pick up where we left off and invite our audience to post questions on the YouTube chat. We are not a monolith, and we want to hear from you. So please pose your questions to Rose in the YouTube chat, and we will have a virtual dialogue with our valued audience. However, this evening's lead question is activism in Buddhism. Can personal enlightenment lead to group uplift for freedmen? But before Rose takes the stage, I want to reintroduce this accomplished woman to anyone that didn't join us on July the 7th when she made her first appearance. Although now retired and living in Washington, D.C., Rosalye settles as a native New Yorker. D.C. has been her home for more than 20 years, and in her interest in history as a child is what led her to a career as an archivist. An archivist works to identify, preserve, and make original source materials available to researchers. And while whites lead the field at 84.6%, followed by Hispanics at 6%, blacks are pulling up the rear at 3.4%. Family, Rose Settles represents us well in that 3.4%, as her career included working at the NYC Municipal Archives and Studio Museum in Harlem, the CBS News Network as a reference librarian, the National Archives and Records Administration, architect of the Capitol, and in various information management positions at the Department of Treasury, including serving as the department's records management officer. She holds a BA in English from Pace University, an MA in American History from a New York University, and an MS from Columbia University. Team Rare welcomes back an undeniable rare guest, and we would love it if everyone would take a minute to hit the like button. Please hit the like button now. It costs you nothing and really helps to promote our show. Share and invite family and friends, fellow parishioners to join us with the conversation and engage with the panel in the chat. And now, without further ado, Rose, do you think practicing Buddhism and achieving personal enlightenment will lead to group uplift for freedmen? And if we could wrap it in a bow, specifically our reparations movement. Rose, a great big welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come back a second time. And the answer to your question, Kelly, is yes. I think the phrasing of the question was very interesting because I think it kind of sets up and infers a dichotomy. And I don't necessarily think that's the case because we can be more than one thing simultaneously. So, yes, we can work toward social justice for freedmen, and we can also be enlightened. And that's because when you become enlightened, you understand that everything and everyone is connected. And by a result of that, you will work to help other people get what is owed to them because it's the right thing to do.
Okay. So I have a quick question. Is it kind of like a follow-up to that? Rose, thank you again for coming back. My question would be, so how would we muster, as an example, how would we muster the collective, the Buddhist collective, to get behind the advocacy of reparations?
You simply ask them.
Okay. Okay.
You know what?
It's not complicated.
Right.
It's really not.
Right. But, you know, the thing is, and this is a question that Kelly kept pounding at me a few days ago. The organization is there to propagate the philosophy of Buddhism. It is not there to, as an organization, get behind a particular movement or have a particular type of advocacy. The difference is this, is that Buddhism itself imbues a sense of mission in individuals. And it is up to that individual to choose what his mission is, not the organization. Even though I get what you guys are saying, the thing is to approach individual Buddhists, especially individual Buddhists who happen to be of our same ethnicity, to get behind reparations. And you'd be surprised that a surprising number of them, out of a sense of mission and understanding, would get behind and actually become quite active in the Buddhist in the reparations movement, because that, especially during the time that I came up in Buddhism, that's what we were trained to do.
Well, there was a notion of being engaged.
Yeah.
Well, we're always engaged because we're out with other people. So that's how we engage them. That's how we have an opportunity to have a discussion or a dialogue with them about the notion of what do you believe that all human beings deserve?
Yeah, I think engagement, in definition, it more applies to, in the past, there have been certain portions of the community, or at least it's perceived this way from the outside, that the aspect of kind of the individual journey, or the individual aspect of that, prevents people from getting involved with social matters. So when you have the famous Buddhist who just passed away, I can't, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but it's Thich Nhat Hanh. I think that's how it is. He's Vietnamese. He was actually a proponent.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Is it Tick? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Thich
you for
Nhat.
correcting me and also giving me the proper way to pronounce that. But
No
Thich
worries.
Nhat Hanh was behind the Buddhist community, or at least those who want to, right? At the end of the day, getting behind social causes, social justice. And his idea on that was that by getting involved with those things and essentially helping with social justice now, it essentially is a part of the Buddhist framework. That being said, it seems as though there's a portion of the community who's kind of stayed away from social justice causes.
And I think that's always been the case, though. I think
Right.
back in the 60s, everybody wasn't on board. But, again, we have to engage or create the opportunity to engage people who might be open to the possibility, and realize that some people are not going to, and that's fine. We're looking for and connecting to the people who do.
Right.
I wanted to just bring into this conversation about some of the SGI and also President Ikeda's thought patterns when it came to race relations, especially like in America. He told this story in the Human Revolution, Volume 1, where he was in Chicago. This is right before a meeting. You know where I'm going, Rose, and Arthur, you should know too. Where he this was before he was actually going to engage people in like in a meeting at one of the centers before they went to Wabash. I think they were on Foster, if I'm not mistaken.
No, they were on Lawrence.
Lawrence, okay. I was in the vicinity. I was in there. So he was in Lincoln Park, and he saw like a group of children playing, and there was this one young black little boy that wanted to play with the white children, but they were really they shoot him away. They bullied him and shoot him away, and President Ikeda saw this, and he vowed that day that he wanted to use Kosen Rufu to bring about world peace, to actually have an environment where race is no longer an issue about us being able to work together. I'm paraphrasing, but he wanted to basically create a world where racism is no longer a thing. And because he knew and seen it with his own two eyes, coming from all the way from Japan, not knowing the English language, the treatment that Black people were getting and still get in this country. And he was also quite aware of the foundations of that as well. And the SGI, I would conjecture, because of that, has always been an organization that has been what's the good word for this? It has been always aware and supportive of different ways to use your voice for social justice. I mean, they have like articles and articles written by diverse about inclusion, equality, equity, talking about marginalized groups. They create spaces for LGBTQ people because of and support um, their, just like this inclusion even in law for marginalized groups. So I would not think it would be so far fetched to really be able to say, looking at the history of this particular group of people that's in America, and also all of the things that they have gone through, even though that their ancestry built the country and we're still contributing to the country, that a debt is owed. And if they have people that support this notion, this is something that I believe that the SGI should support as well. Because like all of this is really, because like all of this is like really contributing to like peace in the land. If we have like a group of people that's constantly disenfranchised, oppressed, depressed for centuries, there could be no peace. There's always going to be unrest. And our wholeness is actually contingent of on the country being whole. If you even notice, like a lot of either other social justice groups or social justice movements in other groups got their cue from how Black people have been able to mobilize, organize, and push things through. uh, I can think like the 14th Amendment in of itself, how many other groups of people who are able to utilize that law that was written for freedmen into their advantage. So we are really the foundation of what it means to actually create this this place in this democracy experiment to actually work with our wholeness.
I like the fact that you say it's an experiment because it is,
Yeah.
but um, we as a group and those who have come before us, we've always been in the forefront of standing up for what's right, even at our detriment sometimes. But there have been and there will always be, in my mind, people who are willing to stand up for what is right.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
the other thing that I was trying to emphasize to Kelly is that in the SGI, I mean, I'm not talking about maybe, I don't know about other areas, but in Chicago, where we have a pretty large membership, uh, there's actually a very high percentage of people, both professionally and as a passion, participate in particular advocacy efforts, would be it for Black people, LGBTQ, whatever, you know. But the thing is like there's two things that you have to deal with the SGI in America. First of all, the SGI in America has a tendency not to get directly involved with political things in America, on the
Mm.
one hand. And then on the other hand, it exhorts its people to be involved with things that involve social change. So you really can't come at the SGI as an organization to support a particular thing, but
That's
through
negative.
osmosis, it inculcates in its people to care about social justice things and to participate in making those changes through their actual bodies in the way in the way that they live.
Absolutely, because
Well,
again,
Yeah,
when we change, the environment that we're in is going to
right.
change. The same way they came out with a statement when George Floyd was killed,
Yes.
Yes, we did.
re-emphasizing again that this is wrong, this is unacceptable, and that those people who practice this particular Buddhism must continue to reconfirm their commitment to acknowledge the humanity in all people and work toward peace wherever it is they are the best way they can.
Right.
So, so
And the other thing that I'd like to point out about the SGI too, which I think is powerful, is because the SGI is not a Buddhism that is centered around priests. It is
Right.
actually more of a secular socially engaged type Buddhism in which
Yes.
laymen are running everything, not priests. So
Right.
what you might be thinking about, Derrick, is the way that priest-centered Buddhisms in this country carry themselves as far as like issues in society, whereas the SGI, even though the organization does not directly place itself in that front end role, it exhorts its members to be socially engaged for the purpose of changing the world for the better.
Because
I'm
there
glad
is
you
It's a
brought that
slight
up.
difference. Yeah.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that.
Okay.
What I would argue is that the actual core precepts of Buddhism are monastic in nature. I would argue that, but I won't go into that conversation right now, especially when we talk about like the four noble truths.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, I would argue that they are monastic in nature as far as their origin. But like I said, I won't get into that right now. What I'm more really kind of, I guess my interest was sparked of what you said, Arthur, was that you said that there's a significant portion or significant number of Buddhists in Chicago that are Black. They're also a part of the SGI organization or practicing Buddhism.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm a little bit, how I'm thinking about it is that I doubt that none of them are aware of some aspect of the talk of reparations, right?
Oh, just about all of them are.
A lot of
So
them are.
thank you for saying that. So here's my issue. So here's my issue is that are they getting together outside of the organization? Because I can understand that bridge with the organization to actually create some type of push with regards to reparations to muster a collective, because that's what I'm kind of getting at the end of the day is I do understand that it's an individual journey, right?
Yeah.
And even the aspect of enlightenment. But how do you get people who have common thought process that already have this thought process, right? How do you get those people together to actually work together? Let me share something with you real quickly, just real quick. All right. So for instance, in 2021, there was Buddhists in Massachusetts initiate peace walk to honor Native Americans, right? Okay. So the article starts off like this. The article was written in, it says by Justin Whitaker, June 2019, but I think it's more current than that. It's actually 2020, pardon me. So it says from February 30th, May until June 22nd, religious leaders and peace activists are joining together in a walk across the United States, U.S. state of Massachusetts to commemorate the loss of Native American life in the wake of European colonialization. I like the colonialization part, right? Because they're acknowledging at the end of the day that there are actually oppressing forces and that, that is something that is real. And the verb is for us, right? And then they say the great dying of the Native American people in 1616 to 1619, a year prior to the landing of the Mayflower. This year's walk will be the fourth in a series leading up to the final walk in 2020, with events planned in both North America and Europe. Now, let me get back here 1 second. I lost my place. Sorry about that, guys. So, where's it at? All right, I lost my place. But anyway, my point is that this walk is actually was initiated by a Buddhist order that appears to have started in 1917 in this area. So that's what I think that's more where our question is kind of going to is that how do we get groups, if not the actual organizations itself, which I understand that, how do we get people to collectively participate in things where they're visible at the end of the day, and we can kind of cross from different faiths on the same belief.
Well, I think that I can contribute a little bit to that answer. So the person who shakabuku'd me or actually introduced me to Buddhism also introduced me to ADOS when a lot of us was, with ADOS. So so that person is the one who, brought me into the reparations conversation and sparked me to activism. Okay. And that's how, I got started. So it was through, an active member of the SGI, a leader in the SGI who did that as well. Now, of course, like we're on a different side of it now, but that's fine. But it still didn't stop the work, right? It still didn't stop actually being able to actually push for doing advocacy work in reparations. Now, as far as like your question about like how do we get folk who happen to be of this philosophy also be active in trying to push for this particular social and economic justice agenda, if that's what I'm understanding. Well, I'm of the mind of utilizing that same type of methodology of shakabuku, introducing people to the practice, also introducing people to the conversation about reparations, especially when it affects you as a person, an individual, and your family. And a lot of people, I know that we have spoke with me and Arthur when we were before COVID did what it did, when we were having monthly meetings to introduce the organization and the reparations conversation, we would be packed full. And a lot of the people that we were, talking to were people in our groups with the as far as like the SGI is concerned. When we would go to our meetings, we would, bring up that, and like if we would have like afterward conversation or what have you after our meeting, we would talk about like, hey, we're doing this work, for reparations. This is what it is. Asking questions. People would ask questions of us, and then they say, oh yeah, you should come to informational meeting. And they would come. Like a lot of people within our organization would still come to that, because that same value system that was placed into them about, moving in action to make change and to bring about peace to the land still correlates to this particular issue here. And, and like it's not far-fetched as far as like the SGI denouncing hatred, denouncing racism, denouncing things that have been overtly and subvertly oppressive to Black people. I mean, it's not something that is that they're not aware of or have not participated in themselves. They wrote about it in Living Buddhism, which is the periodical that comes out monthly. And they, put it on our websites and send it out to their membership about these particular things. So so they're aware of it. So utilizing that that same thought pattern that has already been placed out there to the membership is something that we who happen to still be active in doing this work can use to push them forward, to get them activated in this space as well.
Yes, and I would never go for a top-down recommendation, like let's say from a pastor, well, this is what we're going to do. I mean, I would not respect Buddhism in that way if the organization decided to do that. But Cynthia brought up something very important. Shakabuku is life to life. It is not organization to life. In other words, it's like you relate to that person, you wake up that's something in that person through person-to-person dialogue, and that person themselves decides to move on a particular issue or not. I prefer people having absolute freedom in their advocacy or not. It's like I tell people all the time, Buddhism does not provide answers. What it provides is a set of tools so that you can develop your own answers out of your own life.
I'm going to jump in. No, hold on. I'm going to let Rose respond to that, and then I'm going to jump in with the question from the chat.
Yeah.
I think what Cynthia said is the way it's going to happen. Right. When people who are espousing this particular Buddhism come together, that's an opportunity to have a conversation that weaves into reparations. Are you familiar with this movement? Because of COVID or whatever, if you're interested, let's get together and talk, and so on and so on. And that person will tell somebody else. So again, it's basically engaging life to life and asking them. But it's already started from what Cynthia has told me. So it just needs to be amplified and spread out more. Go ahead, Kelly.
Glad you said.
In the chat, Grown Woman Gamer says, given that most freedmen are raised to be Christian, can the act of opening ourselves up to a new belief system like Buddhism be a form of resistance that is a pathway to achieving social change?
Yes.
Yes.
I would just change one thing in that statement question. Buddhism is not
a belief system.
It's a philosophical way of living.
Right.
But
it's an understanding system.
Yeah.
Buddhism is actually both a philosophy and a religion at this point. That's the actual truth. Yeah, it's
no, it's not.
It's not.
Yeah, it is.
No, that's
Well, what do you think, Rose? What do you think, Rose? As someone that actually practices.
What I would say is that there are various forms of Buddhism. Each of them over the thousands of years have adapted and made it whatever it is for the time and the people.
Right.
And that, in my opinion, it is a religion, but it's a blueprint for one's life.
Yeah.
That there is no need to see something outside of yourself. That you have all the answers that you might pose questions. But one realizes that because you're interconnected, like everything else in nature, you cannot build your happiness without including other people in that process. And that includes being happy means being peaceful, being treated with equality and equity for me and everybody else, because we're connected. I can't have it if you can't have it. So it behooves me to work for you too. So.
Yeah.
Sister Fate.
And I think oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to engage the chat and then you can jump back in, Arthur. Sister Fate says, if Buddhists can chant for world peace, can they chant for reparations for freedmen too? And then she follows up and says, a call to action for all freedmen Buddhists, get together and chant for reparations. Let's make it a national day. Is that a possibility?
Well, the thing about this Buddhism, you can chant for anything that you want to chant for.
Yeah. You can chant for your corn to fall off your left toe if that's what you
know. Because when you chant, you make the cause to change something.
Right.
You plant the seed for the effect to happen. So absolutely, positively.
Right.
I do want to follow that up with cause to action. It's important to understand that Buddhism, chanting in of itself builds up the courage in order for you to take control, to do the work. And because you can chant all day Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and I don't have a problem with that. I've heard people giving experiences where I chanted 12 hours and this changed. I chanted 18 hours and this changed. And that's fine. But there has to be action that is also part of that work.
That's how it works. You chant for the wisdom to know what action to take. Because in any philosophy, faith without action is artifice.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice way to say faith without works is dead.
Right. But the thing, one of the things in one of our conversations with Derrick is that now, as majority of people who know me, I'm probably the most atheist maybe on the planet. But atheism is not workable in a societal sense. And this is what I mean. It's a position. It's a philosophical position. But when I encountered Buddhism, it gave me a way to deploy my atheism in a social sense, in a workable sense, in a way that I can give something to somebody else, and that enables them to work positively in their own lives. And also because of the fact that Buddhism does not subscribe to a god or any kind of deities, it did not interfere with my core philosophical position, which is that of atheism.
Well, and
I
I
mean,
think
but
it's also important to say specifically about atheism is that it's like a position. It just answers one question: do you
That's
believe in
it.
God or God? That's it. I
That's
mean,
it.
like as far as like how to govern your life, how to move in life, and things of that nature. Oftentimes, people who call themselves agnostic atheists, hard atheists, whatever, it's usually paired with something else that actually will influence their worldview and even sometimes their advocacy. So you'll have like some atheists say that I'm humanist, or which is this basically like wanting to basically help all people, or just like believe in the goodness of people and pushing forward the collective of people. You have some people also who would say that they're skeptics, so they question a lot before that they would actually come to a conclusion based on whatever additional knowledge that they get about whatever. So I am of the mind, because like I said, I have the experience that my practicing Buddhism led me to be atheist, because what it did was it let me know that anything and everything that I was able to achieve was something that I did. And it was not credited to any other deity outside of me or anybody else. I mean, like if people helped me get to whatever or get whatever, yes, they would deserve credit for that. But how like a lot of people would say, I was actually watching the interview that we did today with Jeremiah Kamara, Arthur, and he was talking about Steve Kerr, and how he was asked, how do you how do you do the things that you do in basketball? And he said, God did it all for me, or whatever. God blessed me. And he was like, dude, you're 6'10". You have you are genetically dispositioned to pretty much be good at basketball. And then you practice, and then you got on a team, and then you were able to play and play and play and play and play, and this is here you are. So the person who did it is you. You
Right.
did the work, and now you're in this position, right?
Right.
And I think that one of the things that Buddhism has taught me is that when you do the work and you stay consistent in the work, utilizing the universal principle of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is really what's going to make things happen for you and also happen for others in your environment. And that's what I normally use when I'm thinking of the advocacy that we do in this space for reparations. So, and even though like I know that the SGI loves to call this a religion, it really bugs the shit out of me, guys. I'm sorry, it
yeah,
does.
but
But,
there's a reason why they do that, and I can understand why it would bug both of you. I actually watched a very good video on someone explaining why persons who are atheists want to try to explain that Buddhism is not a religion or lean more that way. And that's why I said it's actually both when you look at the history of it. And Rose is right. There are so many different schools, or there's several schools, but philosophies.
sure.
So the religious aspect might not be in the one that you subscribe to, fair enough, but it's definitely there. Also, when you talk about the three major schools, the Hinayana is the oldest school, right?
Right.
That's also the same one that the Theravada comes out of, that the Thai people believe in. They believe in ghosts. They believe in spirits. I mean, Buddha basically walked on water. So you have all these supernatural events that happen within inside of this philosophy,
No.
right?
No.
Yeah.
All of those things that you're talking about, Derrick, are accretions that got added to Buddhism as
Yeah.
it progressed along in time.
Right.
And
Shakyamuni
that's why
did
you
not
have
want
to.
that.
Absolutely.
He
He
was
did
like,
not want
he
that.
didn't want
Yeah.
any of that mess.
No, he
Okay.
didn't.
So you have to understand the principle of the three periods. Okay. Which is like the period, what is called the first period, called the period of the correct law. The second period is the counterfeit law, and the third period is that of the decadent law, which is the period that we live in, otherwise known as Mapo.
Mapo.
Right.
Yes.
and even though this is the most confused period, this is also the period in which we are getting right back to the very essence of Buddhism itself, which is encapsulated in the phrase Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So all of those things that you're talking about, yeah, it's cool to look at it from a historic standpoint, but even the Buddha himself, when he preached the Lotus Sutra, said that all of these accretions over time will happen. And
yes,
that's what you're looking at. A lot of this stuff that you're looking at is not Buddhist. It's really mostly cultural stuff that got added to Buddhism as it was traveling through from Nepal, India, Southern Asia, through China, through Korea, and then its final flowering with Nichiren Daishonin in Japan.
Right, I agree with that. But that was the whole point and why there has a religious component, is the historical aspect.
We're
people
trying
can
to
add
take
these
away
things
the
over time.
religious stuff. I don't know what it is about Black people where they got to put religion on every damn thing.
Let me also say this: that even those writings are still based on what someone else says.
Yes.
So,
of course.
So the point that you're making at the end of the day, that those things are added after time, is relevant if you take the approach that that's actually Buddha wrote that, which is fine, right? That's fine. But I'm just saying that at the end of the day, you have philosophies that have built over the course of more than 2 millennia. You're going to have a religious component to that in certain places or not. It's just, that's just the way it is. Not saying all of it, but it's
one
there.
of the missions of the people that live in Buddhism now is to dismantle those accretions and get right back to what really counts, which is cause and effect, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and Ishin and Sanzen. That's it. All this other stuff, people walking around with bald heads and yellow robes and all this other mess, all that is crap. That's not.
You're so silly, dude.
I would also add to the discourse that there are certain because America is America, and America does give they give a bit more room and space when it comes to faith-based organizations.
Right.
It helps to call your organization a religion. I know atheists that actually are in the process of taking some of their organizations and setting them up as churches.
Yeah.
You know, there's no single deities. You know, there's the church of non God or what have you. But you know, the reality is that there's going to be certain dispensations that's going to be given to faith-based organizations. There goes, you can call it a religion, and then you can operate. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Sister Fate, tax cuts.
I'm gonna just say this, right? Fact. I'm gonna just say this: 500 million followers, right?
Sure.
I mean, once you get, like I said, at some point in time, a belief or a way becomes more than that, just by that. But Rose, I'd like to hear you chime in on this.
I want to hear from Rose, but I want to kind of engage the chat a little more as well. Sister Fate also says, well, can we add another flavor of Buddhism for Blacks? And also to tie in what Arthur said, you know, why can't Black folks get over this religious stuff? Why are we tied to this as a guiding light for us? And I would say after 402 years, you know, and very little, if any, therapy for what we've endured in that time frame, I think religion has become kind of a therapy, a place to soothe your soul for a lot of us. So, Rose, can you speak to a Buddhism for Blacks?
I think Buddhism is for everybody if they choose it.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Asian, short, tall, live in the North, the South, or wherever it is that you are. It's available for everybody because you are that thing. You are the essence of the universe.
Right. Right. It can't be for Blacks. That's like saying gravity for Blacks.
You know, and this thing.
Well, I really like gravity.
This particular Buddhism doesn't make those artificial constructs.
Right.
Sure.
Buddhism is Buddhism. You are the essence of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
You are the energy of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So, you know, it's it's a choice. And I think that people have a weave towards something because it speaks to them in some kind of way.
Yeah.
People have a connection to Buddhism based on their karma.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You
Maybe
know,
some people, you know, like myself, I just knew that what was introduced to me did not really answer the questions that I had. And human beings since prehistoric times have been grappling with the issue of what it means to be human,
Right.
what it means to be here. How do
Alive.
we
Right.
get here? What happens when we pass? What happens to that energy? So I think people gravitate towards something inside inside them that makes sense to them. But I think Buddhism is for everybody because it gives the premise that there are no real divisions, that we are all connected. Nothing exists outside of something else.
Mm-hmm.
right.
Right.
You know,
Um,
you
The
know what?
non-self
Let me give
and
them
that
my
and that
experience on the
mom.
plane. Let me give you my experience on the plane. I was on my way somewhere, and I was reading well, at that time it wasn't the Living Buddhism. At that time, the magazine was called Seikyo Times, and I was reading an article about the 10 factors of life. And there was a guy sitting next to me, and he was kind of page hustling. And he tapped me, he said, "What's that you're reading?" And then so I explained it to him what it was. And then when I explained to him what I was reading about in this magazine, I was talking about the 10 aspects or the 10 factors of life. In other words, we were talking before about the 10 worlds, but the 10 aspects means the 10 worlds in as they operate in terms of the 10 that consist of uh, the appearance, the nature, the entity, inner power, outer influence, internal cause, external cause, latent effect, manifest effect, and their consistency from beginning to end. And when I ran them past him, he actually ran them past me better than I explained it to him because he looked at it as a scientific reality. He said, "This is what I work with all the time." And he says, "I'm glad that this is out there in the public because we always try to explain to people that cause and effect is not linear." He says it's a
right.
4-piece process, just like the way that you guys are explaining it in this magazine. And
Yeah.
he's an atheist.
But Buddhism is
Yeah.
reason.
Yes.
Buddhism is reason.
Yes. That's
It's
exactly what
reason.
that.
It's
That's
cause and
exactly
effect.
what
It's
Pastor
reason.
Eugenia said.
So
Yeah.
this notion that we've been taught that we have to look outside ourselves to kind of
Mm-hmm.
understand things. Well, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying people are maybe not, but I think if we because you know our community is not a monolith.
Right.
Right.
So I think for me, the question is, what can we agree on? Can we agree on the notion of what it means to be a human being and what do human beings deserve?
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
What does social justice look like?
mm,
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like? Because in preparation for this, I came across a quote from T.S. Eliot. And again, it comes back to the individual. When you change, your environment will change.
Right.
What
right.
he says is one reason why the lot of secular reformer or revolutionists seem to be easier is this, that for the most part, he or she conceives of the evils of the world as something external to himself. If there is evil incarnate, it is always incarnate in other people, a
Right.
class, a race, the politicians, and so forth, never in oneself. We have to change the tenets in our own hearts
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
about what we think about what it means to be human, what it means and what we're willing to do and what we're willing to do without to
right.
bring about the change that we want to see.
Right.
That check that started this conversation, how do you work to get the check paid?
Right.
Right.
What are you
And
willing to do? But you have to kind of come to that place where, you know, this is something that I can sign on to.
mm-hmm.
This is something I can agree to, but until you make that shift internally and pivot, it's going to be a little difficult. And again, everybody's not going to be on board, but in the past, everybody's not be on board. But we just want the one. We just got to find the ones who are.
Yes.
The critical mass.
The critical mass.
That's all we
Well,
need.
Yeah, I just wanted to, if I could just address like a couple of things that Sister Faith said, especially about when it comes to adding the flavor for it. It comes down to a lot of things what Miss Rose said is having that conversation to really put something on the mind of shifting your thinking and how some of the tenets of Buddhism, even if you don't necessarily practice, even if you never chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo in your life, there's still basic principles that can be utilized in order for you to be able to put it in action and make it applicable to life. Like she said, it is an individual thing, and it starts with the choice. And you're absolutely right when you say Buddhism is reason. That's exactly what President Ikeda said. Above all,
yes.
Buddhism is
all
reason.
the time. Yes.
All the time, you know, and that's what, and when you even are imploring things like critical thinking and what have you, and skepticism and really, you know, going through that whole methodology of being able to utilize reason, even when it comes to activating yourself in this space, that is something that anybody can do, no matter what their religious affiliation is. You know, that's why you can have people that have like a lot of different beliefs or not beliefs, but they can still come together, as Rose was talking about, on this thing that we all agree on, which is a debt owed? Yes.
Yes.
And you know, and how. And are you willing to do the work in order for it to happen? Yes. And I also want to say about, you know, Buddhists in Nepal, or like, you know, the Tibetan Buddhists, that's still like a temple priesthood, ethereal type idea. And even in that area, they still have different schools of thought and practices when it comes to Buddhism. You know, ain't quite like a Christianity with over 45,000 different denominations, but you still do have different schools of thought when it comes to this. But again, I think that where we would make it make sense is, can we utilize a lot of these different principles and make it applicable here so that we can get the work done?
Yeah.
Right.
This is how I see the situation. I think Sister Faith brought up a good point. I do think, as we all agreed on, that Buddhism is a vehicle that can help us with regards to advocacy and reparations. I do agree with that. I do think that it is possible, although I don't know how likely it is, to actually create or tweak a version with regards to us. I do. And it's been done for other groups of people, right? To basically tailor a version. This is revolutionary now, y'all. Don't get me twisted, right? At the end of the day, but to create a version or a vehicle of Buddhism that worked for a specific group of people. That's not to say that everyone can't be a part of it, right? At the end of the day, but understanding also the history of Buddhism too, with regards to the class dynamic and some of the things that were going on in that time. There are other vehicles too, or versions of Buddhism that are tailored towards persons who are subjugated or oppressed, right? And it was created afterwards off of the same principles, off of a lot of the same scriptures. So I think that she's going somewhere with that. I don't know if we are like at that point yet. With that being said, I think that all versions of Buddhism have the potential, right? I'm not convinced at this point that the potential is the same between all of the different versions of it, or different philosophies, different schools. But I do think the core, which they all share primarily, is there. So they all have the potential. To me, it's a little bit problematic with regards to some of the conversation we've had, because it seems like it's a one-to-one scenario. And Rose said something, and I wanted to chime in on it at that point in time. We're looking to get that critical mass, to get people behind that, right? So I guess to go back to the original question is, how do we get the people who already have like mind, right, who agree with reparations, to kind of get around and rally around one another, right, for visibility and perhaps to influence other persons that would not only hear them in a one-on-one, but also would see them. Is it possible? Do y'all think that's possible? Or
Derrick, I'm going to give you a copy of the Human Revolution Volume
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
Because I've even said this specifically about, you know, the work that we did, and this is before, you know, stuff went awry. I said, man, to get that critical mass that you were discussing, we can really use a lot of the principles that were laid out with the SGI way back when the second president, Jose Toda, charged President Ikeda to really grow this Buddhism outside of Japan. I mean, like, he had a whole plan. He wanted him to add about 750,000 members in a certain amount of time period. And Daisaku was like, what? I you know, that I'm paraphrasing, but he said that in Japanese. I don't know how to say what in Japanese, but you know, it kind of went like that. And and it was really the theme, the constant theme, and this is the same theme that is even utilized today to grow the organization. I mean, this is an organization that was mainly started very small when in the 40s, when President Magaguchi and Jose Toda was arrested because they wouldn't take the talisman of Shintoism, I wouldn't say.
Right.
But what they ended up doing after they left, they basically recruited young people and shared this Buddhism life to life, just like Rose said. And then next thing you know, you grew this particular Buddhism because people were talking. The people who was able to get that message started sharing it with other people, and it went on and it snowballed. And then next thing you know, that they came to America, and then they came to Canada, and they went down to South America, and then they went into other countries. You have now over 192 countries that have memberships of people actually practicing Buddhism. And it's the same, and we can take that same principle and utilize it in this space as well.
Yeah. The other thing, Derrick, is something that disturbed me a little bit about what you said. When I started practicing Buddhism in 1974, okay, it was very Japanese. And over a 20-year period, they started stripping away Japanese elements, which come from Japanese culture, in the way that they practice Nichiren Buddhism in America and all these other countries. One of the main things that I think is beautiful about the engaged Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin is that it is not attached to culture. It is not attached to people of a particular race or ethnicity. And if you do that stuff, you're actually taking Buddhism backwards. Okay, just like even though E equals MC squared came out of the mind of a Jewish person, it's not a Jewish principle. It is not just for Jewish people. Okay, and Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, as the fundamental law that causes everything to exist, is not a cultural thing. It is a fundamental principle for anyone that has the balls to want to change their life and change their environment to use. No different from a wrench. Wrenches are not just for Mexicans, they're for Black people too.
No, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, bro. But and I'm not gonna have this conversation today. But I hear what you're saying. But there are some issues with what you're saying. I'm gonna just say it like that at the end of the day, because you have forms of Buddhism that are much younger than what we're talking about. That, as Rose said, which this goes all the way back, they fit the time criteria what people need.
Yeah, we have,
and that's why I said Sister Faith, within reason, of course, you know what I'm saying? But that's why I said Sister Faith. I think that she may be on to something there, because at the end of the day, even the term vehicle, right? Mahayana, What's the term? Greater vehicle, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Rose. Is that correct?
It is. And what I'm going to say, because we're running out of time, is that it's life to life. In the same way you had discussions before COVID, that's how it's going to happen. It might happen when you're in a coffee shop with somebody and you start kind of naturally talking about reparations. We're not talking about where people go on Sunday. We're talking about coming together on this particular thing. This particular thing. Whatever people believe, we know that by the way they show up in the space. It's okay. What we're trying to do is get those people who, for a minute, can maybe think about the notion of social equality and what that means for freedmen. Because a lot of people haven't even thought about this seriously. So that's what I'm saying. So, it's a conversation with someone in your environment. And like, oh, you know what? I never really thought about that. Can you tell me some more about that? So it's about education and also engaging people who are at a space in their life where they can pause for a moment and think about something else.
I'm loving it. Sister Faith jumped in, and I'm going to jump in because we are out of time. But Sister Faith says, all I'm saying is Black folks might need a little more understanding and a little less faith in something we haven't seen.
I agree.
I agree, and I agree. I agree. She puts that so succinctly and is so pithy. And I just want to end with a quote that I saw recently that said, I was looking for someone to inspire me, motivate me, support me, keep me focused, someone who would love me, cherish me, make me happy. And I realized all along that I was looking for myself.
Mic drop. Mic drop. Family, Freedmen family, it's amazing how fast an hour goes by when there's good food and good company. And we had both tonight. We are honored that guest Rosalye Settles and my big brain co-host fed our souls, and they did so with love and intention. And I want to say I'm glad that I know that all I have to do is seek and I will find. So I will seek out the Buddhist community in Washington, D.C. The DMV Freedmen will put together a presentation and a proposal to the local Buddhist group to speak to them on occasion, to introduce our mission, what we're doing, and to jumpstart, hopefully, the reparations movement in the Buddhist community in DC, and hopefully that will appleseed across the nation. That's our hour of power, and we look forward to seeing everyone again Thursday, August 8th at 7 p.m. as our confirmed guest, Reverend George Gilbert, pastor of the Holy Trinity United Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., and the executive director of the Center of Racial Equity and Justice. Team Rare will chop it up with Reverend Gilbert to discuss CRT, replacement theory, the role of the church, and how does this affect reparations. Again, many thanks all around to guest Rose Settles, Team Rare, our devoted audience, and everyone stopping by to visit for the first time. Please connect with us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Rare is a by the people media production, and we are everywhere you are. Please hit us up with questions, comments, and topics you would like to see us address, and we will get it in our production schedule. If you're a returning member of our audience or just joining us for the first time tonight, you may be assured that we will leave you with a scripture, a quote, or word to bind and sustain us until we meet again. And tonight, as we depart, I will say from a quote, I am a drop in the ocean, but I am also the ocean. I'm a drop in America, but I'm also America. Every pain, every confusion, every good and every bad and ugly of America is me. And as I transform myself and heal and take care of myself, I am very conscious that I'm healing and transforming and taking care of America. I say this for American cynics, but it's also true globally, and it's for real. So says Zen Buddhist teacher Dr. Larry Ward. Peace and love to all. Amen. Ashe. Assalamu alaikum. And good night.
Good night, everyone.